I love this stuff. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Okay, hang on. Okay, I think we're live now.
I think we've been live for a while.
Welcome. Welcome. We can edit that out later. Welcome to our live training tonight. I'm Terry Holland, trainer of NLP, hypnosis, and timeline therapy.
And you're also the queen of NLP. And I'm Stefano Casalter. And I am a award-winning speaker, master NLP practitioner. And I'm just here to tell jokes while you teach everybody something.
Nice.
Nice. Okay, I'm pumped about tonight.
Yeah,
because this is something that we've been working on for a long time. And it's applicable to anybody. It doesn't matter if you're climbing the corporate ladder, you need to sell yourself. Mm-hmm. If you are a salesman, you sell products. If you're a business owner, you sell yourself and you sell your products and services as well.
Right.
And this all comes from some certain discoveries. It started for me when I started my online business. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't convince people to buy my products and services. And I always tell this story because it's one of the turning points in my life. And I was desperate when I started this business because I lost everything in a factory fire. And I was left there with a pregnant wife. I had a 2-year-old daughter. Times were tough for me. I lost my entire life savings and I couldn't figure it out. I could not sell my products and services. And I thought it'd be easy. I thought by starting this business, all my problems would go away. Besides, I knew everything there was to do with online marketing. My knowledge was great. And I was sitting with a prospective client one day and I was trying to dazzle her with all my knowledge, but it just wasn't clicking in. And just as an offhand comment, I told her about something one of my old clients did. So they used to be doing this, then they made one change and they did this, for example, and then that was the result they got. And it was weird because something clicked in her. I saw something change. And then I told her another story about a company I used to deal with, and we did something that changed our sales dramatically. And it happened again. She was listening to the things that I was saying. And even the stuff I was saying before started to register with her. Something just happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I remember when I started my first business in personal training, I was not good at sales. I knew how to train people, but I didn't know how to sell. And without knowing how to sell, I didn't have anyone to train. So for my first few months in business, I struggled. And every month I would say, next month is going to get better. And next month will get better. And next month will get better. And the next month would come and it wouldn't be any better than the month before. And in fact, it was even worse. I didn't know what to do. Have you ever been in a position like that before where you keep trying and you're trying and you think next month will get better and better and it's just not happening? So I read all the books. I read books on sales and on closing and all kinds of techniques, and each book contradicted the next book and I still wasn't any further ahead. I was just more confused. So finally I smartened up and I hired a coach, someone who could help me see what I was doing wrong or maybe what I was missing. And one of the things he said to me was, Terry, you have this great story of how you got to this position with your own health. He said, you have a great story of transformation and you're not telling people. I wasn't sharing that story in my sales consultations. So he told me, he said, I think if you can share that story with people, you'll see a difference in your sales. So I tried it out and I was amazed at what happened next.
This became the birth of what we had been talking about and the strategies that we had created that we call story selling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a mixture of NLP with deep storytelling secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's designed to influence people on an unconscious level. So one of the most influential hypnotherapists of all time was a man named Milton Erickson. Yeah, he was a doctor, but he focused on his therapy on hypnosis.
Yes.
And he was a miracle worker when it came to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
He was an old man in a wheelchair, and people would come to see this man, and for some reason they would have no choice but to change.
Right. And sometimes people would go to Milton Erickson and they would be looking for some profound change in their life. And he would just sit and tell them stories. And he would tell them story after story after story. And people would leave and they'd go, I went to see that Erickson guy and he didn't do anything. He didn't do any therapy. He didn't do any work on me. He just told me stories. And yet somehow these people would experience a profound change. And they didn't know what was going on. They didn't realize what Erickson was doing, that he was using stories to elicit change in people at a deeply unconscious level.
And according to Erickson, the most effective and permanent way to make a change in people was to touch them on an unconscious level.
Right.
If you want them to buy a product or service, you have to bypass that resistance, bypass that critical factor that people have in their heads that put walls up.
Right.
And the way we do that is by telling stories.
Right.
It's something crazy happens when you tell a story. And you and I both know this because we go out on stage and we tell our personal stories and our stories to people, and we feel it. Mm-hmm. Something happens as soon as you start, and we've said this before, but when you tell a story, something changes in somebody's mind.
Yes. Yeah. So when you tell a story, people go into a light trance. It's trance-inducing. So when someone's in a trance, we need to talk about what trance is to explain this, and a little bit about your unconscious mind. So you have a conscious mind and you have an unconscious mind. So your unconscious mind, and pardon my broken hand, if this is your unconscious mind, until the age of about 7, suggestions, ideas, they go in unfiltered, uncritically. There's no barrier. So an adult says something to you, you just accept it as a truth. And then around the age of 7, something called the critical faculty of the conscious mind comes into place. And this is when a child begins to distinguish fantasy from reality. And over top of that critical faculty forms the conscious mind. So this is why around the age of 7, children start to question things that maybe before they believed. Certain myths they might have believed before their parents taught them, or it was easy for them to believe in things like a tooth fairy. And then around that age, this critical faculty comes into play, and they start to distinguish between what's real and what's fantasy. And it's part of their development. Now, some people have a very thick critical faculty. So some people, their critical faculty is like this, and then they have this conscious mind up here. And it's hard to bypass that because they're the type of people who are incredibly analytical, and they may say they have a hard time imagining things. So when you tell them a story, this opens up. It's like opening up this door and allowing those suggestions to just go in uncritically, unfiltered. It's bypassing resistance of the unconscious mind. So now a person can hear what you have to say without judgment, without being critical of it. And now this doesn't mean that you manipulate people through stories or can, anything like that, it just means that now they're open to hearing what you have to say. They're open to listening. So as before, they might have had a lot of resistance. So imagine this in a sales context where you're talking to someone who maybe they have a lot of resistance to your product or your service, and now they're open to hearing about it. What do you think that would do to your sales process? Do you think that would make it easier to sell to people?
It's absolutely amazing. And we could go on for hours on this because it's so rich and deep. But
Totally.
we want to give you some tips where you can just take this right now and start making changes in your own business.
Right.
It's worked wonders in my business. For example, I learned this when I was doing a webinar one time, and we had a 100% conversion on this low-cost product we were selling.
Wow.
And the reason was we did the standard poke a little bit of pain, but then we told stories. I told stories about real, true stories about, say, for example, a dentist friend that had his business ruined just because people were leaving bad reviews on his website. See, that little bit of a story, everybody can kind of relate to that. If you're a business owner, that's one of your thoughts in your back of your mind. If you get bad reviews, it could kill your business, literally. So if you tell a story where you show where somebody used to be, so this dentist, he had his business ruined, then you tell the change that he made, which what he did was he started a reputation management program. So he built up better reviews, which counteracted the bad reviews, and he ended up coming up ahead of everybody else at the end. Okay. So this webinar was filled with little stories like that showed the transformations of other people had that the client could relate to. And every single person that watched that video bought our low-cost product. It was an easy low-cost product, but that led to increased sales for our higher ticket items. So that's just an example of how I've used it at my business.
Nice. Yeah, so we can create stories that move a person from indecision to decision, being able to decide something, where they maybe putting them in a state for having them feel the way we want them to feel. And when you tell a story, people, they feel that, right? They feel what it is that you want them to feel. You can also use this to handle objections. So there's only 4 objections in sales, or 4. There's only 4. All objections fall into these 4 categories. And one of them is, it won't work for me. This is a person who says to you, they see value maybe in the product, but they go, it won't work for me. Or I used to hear this all the time, personal training. I've tried everything. This won't work for me. And that's a perfect spot to put in a story about a client who also thought it wouldn't work for them. And then you share with them the journey that they went through, and then there are amazing results after. Now, of course, you want to use a real story. Don't make one up. Find a real story of someone who had a similar belief that they believed this won't work for me. And then you lead them through the story to a point of how it worked for them. They had amazing results from this. And what that does with the person, so they go into a light trance, and they're going to unconsciously, they're putting themselves into the story. So while you're talking about this other person that they've never met, they're putting themselves in that situation of, yeah, it won't work for me, to seeing themselves go through that transformation and that journey, and then ending up exactly where they want to end up. Powerful way to use a story to overcome objections.
Yeah, so picture having a story for all the objections that you might encounter. Can you see pulling those up would just crush those objections? Now, I'm glad you brought that up a bit. We always talk about ecology.
Yeah.
And, we want to make sure this is crystal clear. You don't get good results by lying. No, you don't. If you're telling stories that aren't true, people are going to pick up on it. There's no way to avoid it.
Absolutely.
So when you're bringing your stories, for example, when I first started another business that I used to have, I didn't have my own stories yet. And this might be where the person, you can have a mentor or someone that's trained you in the business, you could use their stories. Ask them if you could use their stories. It don't have to be your personal stories. If you're just starting out, if you're doing multi-level marketing, you might not have your own stories yet. You'll get those, but use other people's stories. They're true stories. Don't make things up. That's the most important thing I want to get across, because to us, ecology is one of the most important things, and that's being true to yourself, because people can sense when you're trying to BS them.
Yeah, which isn't going to work to your benefit in a sales conversation. Mm-hmm. I always tell my students when I'm training them in NLP, they can use my stories as examples. Mm-hmm. And I tell them to do it freely. And I still use some of my trainer stories where I will say, well, my trainer had this experience and this is what happened with his client. And it's totally fine to borrow people's stories in that way. You just want to tell honest stories. Mm-hmm. How else can we use this?
Oh, story selling to my kids. This is one of the most powerful things I've ever been able to do to bypass my children's resistance.
Hopefully they're
Have you ever, what's that? No, they're not. Not yet anyways. They're going to come to me later. I know your tricks. So if I want my kids, or if I'm trying to teach my kids a lesson, what I used to do was tell them what they had to do, what they should be doing. Mm-hmm. And then I learned a little trick is, instead of doing that, I tell them a story about when I was a kid. Here's where I used to be. Here's what I did to make the change. And that's the positive change I want for my kids. And then this is where I am now. Right. And it makes a profound change in them. It seeds, it sells, it seeds those beliefs in people. And here's one of the most important things that you want to do when you're selling. And when I say selling, I mean everything. Like teaching your kids, selling your product, services, is you don't want to tell people what to believe. You want them to feel the belief. Yeah. So when I tell that story of transformation to my daughter, for example, she pictures that. She actually feels that transformation herself. Can you see how powerful that is? It's incredible. So if you're selling your kids, story is the best way to do it.
Yeah. Or your spouse.
Yes. Yeah. Or business partners.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about more. See, there's some stuff you can take home and do right away. And I guarantee you these things will make a positive change in your business and your life.
Definitely. Yeah.
Now, we could go on for a whole week doing something like this. Mm-hmm. Now, wouldn't it be amazing if you could come somewhere online to learn all this stuff in a course or some sort of story selling journey? Ooh. Do you like that? Yeah. I love it. And imagine learning the ability to weave a story rapidly that creates any results you like.
Yeah.
Wherever learn the elements of what makes good stories great. Mm-hmm. It learn to delve into your life and mine these stories out and create a plan on how you can put all these together in a masterful way that you can use for any objection that your client or prospective client would have. How to manage people's states to make them decisive when they're indecisive. Mm-hmm. how to pull stories out of thin air and apply them to the situation you're in any moment you like. Wouldn't that be pretty cool?
I think so.
Yeah. Like a complete plan where you can turn story selling to sell your products and services, whether you're standing on stage or you're going door to door, you're marketing your multi-level marketing product.
Oh yeah, it's great for direct sales.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done that. We've put it together. We've put together the story selling workshop. And it starts in December. December, was it?
8th.
8th, okay. And December 8th, 4 weeks. Yeah, 4 weeks, 1 day a week. We're going to take a break during Christmas time, which is good. You need a break and somewhere to, and a chance to apply these things that you've learning.
Yeah, to
apply. Yes, a Christmas dinner, telling that story to convince your kids to do the dishes. Can you imagine the power in that?
Totally. Yeah, so we'll take a break over Christmas and then start up again in the new year when everyone's refreshed. And
so we're going to have more information on this.
Yes.
Soon after this.
And if you're watching this video and you're interested in it, then just leave us a comment, let us know, and we'll make sure that we follow up with you and that you know when that information is available.
Yeah. And this is something we've been, I've worked for the past 10 years to learn how to master storytelling. And it's the things I've learned and the things that put together create magical situations that you can use to really finally turn your business, start selling more to your prospective clients. It's a magical thing. I'm excited about it. I'm pumped. I can't say enough about it because it's just so transformational, all these little things that we've been doing.
We've been working on it for a while, so we're pretty excited.
Yeah.
And we have some really cool NLP hacks that will help you as well to really level up your stories. So they're not just stories, but well-crafted stories that have a purpose and a result. So we'll talk about predicates. So predicates are words people use to describe their inner world. So people talk in words that are more visual or auditory or kinesthetic or auditory digital. So these would be words like if someone's visual, they'll talk about seeing things. They'll say that looks clear to me, or I can really picture that. And someone who's auditory, they might use words like, yeah, that rings a bell. That sounds about right. Or feeling, kinesthetic, they'll talk about, I have a gut feeling for this. Someone who's auditory digital, very analytical, they may say, I have a good sense of this, or I think I understand, is something an auditory digital person would say. So we're going to teach you predicates and how to use predicates effectively in your communication so that you communicate in the language of the person that you're speaking to every time. When you use someone's predicates, you really are speaking their language. It transforms a conversation. And you can use that in your stories. You can use that also in everyday conversations. So these are skills you can translate into all of your communications. Writing copy, for example. And values. So something we teach in our sales process and the sales training is how to elicit someone's values. This is what's important to them about what you're selling or your product or your service. It's what's important to them. And we'll teach you how to elicit those values and then how to use their values in a story. When you can use someone's predicates, their language, and their value structure, you are speaking directly to them. And they'll feel that. They'll feel like this is for me. So it also helps to create a bond with your customer as well, with your prospect. They will feel that much closer to you. And we know that people buy from who they know, like, and trust. This helps establish that. And what I think is really cool, and this is what I learned how to do with storytelling in my sales process, is how to pre-frame objections.
Mm.
So if someone's going to object, you know the common objections you get in your business. So what if you could pre-frame them early on in the conversation and tell them some stories very covertly, subtly in the conversation to handle those objections before they even come up? Being able to do that is such a powerful skill. For me, that's what really transformed my business, is when I would use my personal story to sell personal training. And I would start with my story. I'd tell them about my background. I'd talk to them about what I did and how I got there and some of the struggles I had along the way. And those are the same struggles that I knew that most of my clients were going to face on their journey. And so I handled their objections before they even came up through a story.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll teach you how to do that.
I think that's valuable.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think for anyone who wants to make more money in your business, this is extremely valuable. Yeah. What's up?
No, that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. It turned my business around. I went from struggling month to month, every month thinking next month will be better. It wasn't better,
Mm-hmm.
to turning a profit. And this was one of the biggest changes I made, was adding stories to my sales consultation.
And that's what happened to me too. That's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
When I was talking to that client, I realized I was story selling. And it was magical. And I landed my biggest contract that day, just with that one little discovery. So I think it's something magical. And I think everybody should be using it. Everybody should know about it and know how to create their stories in a way that convinces and captivates people. And we always say, if it doesn't matter if it's an audience or 1,000 or audience of 1. These are some of the most important skills you could ever learn.
Absolutely. So we'll be sharing more about story selling on our page. And if you want to make sure that you get that information as we release it, then leave us a comment below or send us a private message and let us know that you're interested. And we'll make sure that you have access to the information as soon as it's released. So it'll be December 8th is when it'll be available for the first run of it. So, and we're excited.
Yeah, from the comfort of your own home too.
Yeah. You don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Be in your pajamas.
Hopefully pajamas, yeah.
Hopefully. Something.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
We'll be back again next Wednesday, every Wednesday, 7 p.m. right here on our Facebook page for more training on how to make you the best speaker that you can possibly be.
Have an awesome night.
Good night.